What's up, everybody? My name is Sucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it and subscribe to the channel as well for more videos just like this one every single day. With those things said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we got some interesting news yesterday regarding Kyrie Irving and his availability to play for the Brooklyn Nets, which is still such a weird story. This idea that a guy that is under contract for the team that is healthy is just not eligible to play. But like I said yesterday, we got some news on that front. Essentially, Shams reported that KD and Kyrie have been more in contact, more in communication lately. I didn't know that they weren't in communication, if I'm quite honest, but talking about the game and talking about the team and talking about a possible return and just life in general. Him and KD talking more is kind of the impetus for this idea that Kyrie might be returning to the team soon. And soon is kind of like it's a relative term here. We'll get to the basketball specific stuff and what this means for the Nets and for Kyrie and for Harden and for Durant. But specific to the news thing, let's get the timeline straight first. One of three things has to happen for Kyrie to return to the team. One, the city of New York has to change their rules. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Two, the Nets would have to go back on their stance on allowing Kyrie to play in his current situation. And that would mean that Kyrie would only be eligible to play in road games. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So potentially Kyrie could change his stance on the situation and return. The problem would be it would take 2 to 4 weeks for him to be eligible to play for the team to completely change the situation that he is in. Yes, I'm being intentionally vague here because YouTube could be kind of weird about this kind of stuff. So that's the point, is even if Kyrie today said, I want to come back to the team, it would be like 2 to 4 weeks before that would happen. And I would anticipate that the reason that would happen would be because of a change in Kyrie's decision-making, not the city of New York and not the Brooklyn Nets. Now, let's talk about basketball. This has been an interesting Nets season so far. They've been shockingly good defensively from a defensive rating standpoint. And offensively, they've been lagging behind a little bit. They've had some really, really great individual performances. KD dropping 51 the other night. Harden had like 30 and a half one night. And, you know, they've had guys shooting the ball well, guys like Patty Mills. They're getting a lot of contributions from a lot of different players, but missing Kyrie and then Joe Harris for the last month or so has really limited their ability to be like the best offensive team in the league, which is what they were for all of last season, and especially once we got into the later part of the season, once, all three of these guys were playing together for at least a couple of games. And so it's been weird because I had anticipated that even without Kyrie, the identity of this team would still largely revolve around their ability to score and on the offensive end of the floor. And it just hasn't been as clean offensively for very obvious reasons. If you're missing Joe Harris, who's one of the best spacers in the league, and you're missing Kyrie, who's obviously one of the best guards in the league, you're not going to be as good offensively. And I think the point that's being missed here is those are two elite spacers. And the Nets aren't actually playing with all that much spacing. And in the beginning of the year, they were the best three-point shooting team in the league by percentage. And over the last month or so that Joe Harris has been out, they've been at the bottom of the league in terms of three-point shooting percentage. And there's a lot of mid-range jumpers. It's a weird shot profile. It's a team that gets to the rim some and gets to the free throw line some, but not at like a crazy high rate. It's a lot of KD mid-range jumpers. It's a lot of Harden threes and kickouts for threes. And it's a lot of LaMarcus Aldridge mid-range twos. And they're so good at those, KD and Aldridge specifically in the mid-range, that they're basically like layups without the added benefit of getting to the free throw line. But the shot profile of this team is very, very different than it was last year, simply because the personnel is different. And that's also part of the reason why their defense has been better, statistically at least. When you watch them play, it's kind of hard to believe at times that they're a top half of the league team defensively in terms of defensive rating. Of course, defensive rating is not an end-all be-all metric, but it's the one most commonly used to quantify how good a team is defensively. But the losing Joe Harris and losing Kyrie has led them to a lot of DeAndre Bembry and a lot of Javon Carter and guys like that, a lot of James Johnson out there. And these guys are competent offensively, but they're obviously not elite spacers the way that Joe Harris and Kyrie Irving are. However, they compete defensively, and probably most importantly, specifically with Bembry and Johnson, they give this team a lot of size on the wing, which is something that they lack, whether it's, Kyrie, Joe Harris, Harden, KD, and enter a five here. With the exception of KD, there's not a lot of length there, or in any other combination of different lineups, whether it be Patty Mills or otherwise. And so the loss of Irving and Harris has really altered a lot about this team in a way that I hadn't anticipated. I just kind of figured, oh, well, Harden will be Harden, KD will be KD. They'll be a top 10 team in the league in terms of offense. They'll be a bottom 10 team in the league in terms of defense, and it would be a very similar team to last year. But the limited spacing and the fact they don't have all that many shooters on the floor has completely changed the way that this team plays. Now, if Irving was to return, which it seems like there's a lot of optimism around that, let's just go ahead and operate under that assumption moving forward. That would then shift this team back towards this high-octane offensive team that would lose some of the defensive stuff with having Irving in there a lot more in comparison to having like Bembry, Carter, or James Johnson in there. Now, I do think that they've found some things that can work in this stretch without Joe Harris and without Kyrie. I think Bembry can play. I think in a postseason series, he can try and stay in front of some of the better wings in the Eastern Conference. Off-ball shot making is going to be a problem, but he's learning how to play when he's a non-spacer, how to cut, how to crash the offensive glass. James Johnson, same thing. Can make an occasional jump shot, but he's a really intriguing, like playmaking, facilitating guy that just moves the ball. He's a good player, and I think they found some things there. But what's really intriguing and interesting to me is if you just plug Joe Harris and Kyrie Irving back into this group, and then you also have Patty Mills, who's been playing awesome to begin this season, it's very, very easy to put a devastating spacing team on the floor. You can go Harden, KD, Mills, Harris, Kyrie. Any one of those guys. Technically, you could put KD at the 5 and you'd score almost every time down the floor. I wouldn't recommend it because that's a lot of small players. That's Kyrie, that's Patty Mills, that's Joe Harris, that's Harden, and then there's Kevin Durant who's going to have to do everything defensively. But you can pick any one of those 4 guys, or excuse me, any one of those 5 guys, take them off. There's 4, and then you can put LaMarcus Aldridge out there, who's an elite mid-range spacer, or Nicholas Claxton, who's an interesting role guy, or guys that can facilitate and at least make the correct play, like Blake Griffin and Paul Millsap. And really the only way they could have spaced that well last year was to put Blake at the 5 and hope that he was going to make jump shots and facilitate, but now they have so many more options at that 5 spot. And so ultimately, I am feeling pretty optimistic about this team, and obviously I would have preferred for Kyrie, those of you that are missing the point here, I'm a Nets fan, I would have preferred that Kyrie been available for the entire season. Joe Harris would have been available the entire season. But I think that they've found some things in their absence that in the long term will probably serve them well. And if those guys do return, Harris will return from injury if Kyrie does join him. I think that just adds to the depth and the versatility and the flexibility of these lineups that you really, if assuming those guys are healthy, you really only try those kinds of things when you're resting KD one night or you're resting James Harden one night. But this has allowed them to find some different things within this rotation and kind of tweak some different things. They're by no means a perfect team. They still really struggle on the defensive glass. Again, I think statistically, defensively, it looks like they're better than they are. Sometimes teams are just missing shots, even if they're not playing particularly well. But here's the bottom line for Brooklyn, and this is only going to be elevated if Kyrie does return and if Joe Harris is on the floor. In any game that they have played, like an above 5, like the Hawks game and the Mavs game from last week. In any game like that, now obviously they haven't played particularly well against like top tier contenders, Warriors, Suns, things like that. But in any game that they're playing like a playoff caliber team, the script has been the same. Struggle defensively in the first half, go down double digits, bring it back in the third quarter. If they're within 5 points in the fourth quarter, they're winning the basketball game because they have the most replicable and repeatable offense in the league. And that is give the ball to Kevin Durant, hope he gets to 10 to 15 feet. He's making 70% of those jump shots. And the other team might go on a spurt. They might go on a run because they're relying on ball screen, driving kick, hope this roll guy makes a 3, hope this big guy makes a layup, hope this guy gets all the way to the rim. And it's really good offense, and it works throughout the entire stretch of the game. But in the fourth quarter, when things start to tighten up a little bit and the shots matter more, they have the best fourth quarter offense in the league in terms of a repeatable source of offense that they can go to every time. The problem becomes, in this particular lineup they're dealing with now, is when teams double Kevin Durant, and he kicks it to, a lot of times, Harden, who's wide open. The problem is Harden's not a catch-and-shoot three-point guy, and then he's driving, and it's like James Johnson, DeAndre Bembry, and Paul Millsap are the other guys on the floor, and there's no drive and kick 3 option for James Harden. Now, obviously, with Harris and Irving on the floor, potentially, that changes that equation. But that's the bottom line for Brooklyn, is that's only going to improve their ability to be, arguably, the best fourth-quarter team in the league is only going to be that much more powerful once Irving returns and you have another option to kick it out, and it's just way more difficult, obviously, for teams to double Kevin Durant. So basically what I'm getting at here is I'm hoping Kyrie returns for a variety of different reasons. And once he does, they might actually have benefited from this, what's probably going to be about a 40-41 game stretch without Kyrie by the time he would return under this timeline. They might have actually benefited from that from a rotation standpoint in terms of finding different guys and different lineups and options that work, and then have the other half of the season to integrate Kyrie into the team and fully understand how this group is going to look once we get to the postseason with hopefully everybody fully healthy and the full complement of options. The last point I'll make here is the Harden thing. It's a little odd because last year when Harden showed up, everybody was so impressed that he didn't need to be this like on-ball creator guy all the time. He didn't need to be Houston James Harden, and he shifted his game to be almost a complementary option and a facilitator and a rebounder and, a guy obviously that could score and could run the second unit, but he really did pretty quickly become the third guy. And I think a lot of people thought that he chose to do that. And I think I'm realizing this season that is a bit out of necessity. Granted, maybe it's just beginning of the year. He was hurt in the offseason, playing his way into shape, trying to find his rhythm, but he just doesn't look like Houston James Harden. And if Kyrie plays, that's fine. They don't need him to be Houston James Harden. Now, if Kyrie does not return to the team, they kind of do need that because they need him to run second units when KD's not on the floor so that KD doesn't have to play 40-41 minutes. So I'm still keeping an eye on the Harden thing. It's been a bit rough at times trying to adjust to the foul call rules and things like that. But I think if Kyrie returns, ultimately it's not an issue. If he doesn't, then all of the pressure in the world is going to be on Harden getting back to who he was before. And say what you want about James Harden, I don't know that under pressure has been a great spot for him to be throughout his career. No disrespect to him. But yeah, those are all my Nets thoughts. I just kind of wanted to talk about the Kyrie situation and then throw out everything that I'm seeing so far from Brooklyn to begin this season. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, be sure to check out the boxes on screen. And hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Tuesday, awesome rest of your week, and I will see you all next time.